the editor of Pakistan's largest Urdu newspaper, the Daily Jang, was still at his desk in Lahore on the night of December 30, 1999, when a man walked through the front door carrying satchels full of eggs and apples. He was small. He wore glasses. His hair was neatly parted. He looked like someone who had spent a hard few weeks sleeping badly and eating worse. He walked up to the reception desk and said, very clearly, that he needed someone to come and speak to him. He said he had information that needed to reach the authorities. Then he said his name. "I am Javed Iqbal. I am the killer of 100 children. I am ready to die." To understand what those words meant, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to go back to Lahore, Pakistan, the city where all of this happened, a city of more than 6 million people, ancient and crowded and full of motion. A city where by the late 1990s, thousands of children were living on the streets. They slept near markets. They begged near mosques. They ran in small groups around bus terminals, looking for leftover food or the chance to earn a few rupees carrying bags. Nobody tracked them. Nobody counted them. When they disappeared, most of the time nobody noticed. That invisibility was the first thing Javed Iqbal understood. Iqbal was born in 1961, the sixth of 8 children, into a family with money. His father was a successful businessman who ran a steel trading operation in Lahore. The family had a large home, cars, the kind of stability that most Lahore families did not have. By all external measures, Javed Iqbal grew up with advantages, but people who knew him from his early years said he was always different. Something in the way he related to other people was off in a way that was hard to name precisely. He did not fit. He pushed against the normal expectations of family life. He refused marriage for years, telling his brothers he had no interest in it. By the 1980s, police complaints had begun to appear against him. 2 separate accusations of sodomy were filed, in 1985 and in 1990. Neither resulted in a conviction. The charges did not stick. Iqbal had money, and money in Lahore, as in most places, could make legal problems softer. His father died in 1993. Iqbal inherited millions of rupees. He used the money to expand his house on Ravi Road, a street that ran near one of the most visited public monuments in Pakistan, the Minar-e-Pakistan, the tower built to mark the place where Muslim leaders had gathered in 1940 to demand a separate homeland. Iqbal put in a swimming pool. He bought new cars. And he built a basement with a pond in it, a strange addition that neighbors noticed but nobody questioned. He started businesses that were designed, investigators would later understand, entirely to attract boys. He opened a video game arcade in a neighborhood called Shadbagh. He gave tokens away for free to boys who had no money to pay. He set up a fish aquarium shop later, using the aquarium to draw children in off the street. He opened a gym with the same purpose. He moved through these businesses the way a man moves through a series of doors, each one opening onto the same room. He had a technique investigators would describe as almost invisible in its simplicity. He would throw a 100-rupee note on the floor of the arcade and wait. When a boy bent down to pick it up, Iqbal would announce loudly that his money had been stolen. He would say someone in the room must be searched. The boy would be identified as the thief, and Iqbal, performing concern and authority, would take the frightened child to a back room to deal with the situation privately. Word about strange things happening inside the arcade spread through the neighborhood. Iqbal closed it. He moved to the aquarium. When suspicion followed him there too, he moved again. By 1998, he had changed his method. He no longer needed the storefronts. He had a small group of teenage boys living in his house on Ravi Road, boys he had gathered over time, boys who had been given shelter and food, and whatever version of belonging Iqbal offered them. These boys became his recruiters. They went into the streets, to the parks, to the bus terminals, and they brought other boys back to the house. What happened inside house number 16B, Ravi Road, followed a pattern that Iqbal himself documented in careful detail. He recorded everything. He kept a diary 32 pages long in which he wrote the name of each boy, his age, the date. He kept photographs. He organized the information neatly, with handwritten labels, as if he were maintaining business records. He strangled the boys using a metal chain or his hands. He then dismembered the bodies. And then he dissolved the remains in large vats filled with acid, a mixture of hydrochloric and sulfuric acid that he had learned could reduce a human body, given enough time, to liquid. The liquid was then carried out of the house in drums and poured into the Ravi River. He had calculated precisely how much acid was required for each body. He had worked it out the way an engineer works out a load-bearing problem. He told people later that he had bragged to his brothers, years before the killings began, that he had developed a chemical mixture that could dissolve a person to a skeleton in minutes. His brothers thought he was making it up. Across Lahore during 1998 and into 1999, families were filing missing person reports at police stations. Parents from poor neighborhoods, parents of street children, parents of boys who had gone to find work and not come back. Over 200 such reports had been filed in Lahore in that period. The police recorded them. They did not investigate them. The children were poor. They were transient. They were the kind of people the system registered but did not prioritize. None of the missing person reports were connected to each other. None of them were connected to a man named Javed Iqbal. Then came the incident that changed everything. In late 1999, a boy who had been assaulted at Iqbal's house managed to escape. He went to the police and made a complaint. The police went to Iqbal and confronted him. What happened next, according to Iqbal's own later account, was that he was beaten badly during the encounter with authorities. His head was injured. His back was damaged. He was humiliated. Additionally, the charges against him were also dropped. But something shifted inside Iqbal after that encounter. His mother, who had watched his legal troubles and social reputation crumble over the years, suffered a fatal heart attack shortly after. Iqbal would say later that the police had broken him and then forced his mother to watch, and that her death had unleashed something he could not contain. He wrote this in his diary in the final entry when his count had reached its target. "My count has reached 100. He was a handsome 16-year-old boy from Peshawar, with the grace of God. My mission is complete. Tears roll down my cheeks. I will make sure that my mission and my message reach the world." He had decided to make 100 mothers cry for their sons, the way his mother had cried for him. In late November 1999, envelopes began arriving at the Lahore police headquarters. They contained photographs. They contained a personal diary. They contained a confessional letter. They contained evidence. The letter was handwritten. It described in plain language the rape and murder of 100 children. It gave details about where the crimes had occurred, how the bodies had been disposed of, what the victims had looked like. It gave an address, 16B Ravi Road. The officer who received the letter read it and set it aside. He concluded it was a hoax, someone looking for attention. He did not send officers to the address. He did not compare the information against the missing persons files sitting in the records room. He did nothing. A copy of the same letter arrived at the offices of the Daily Jang newspaper. The editor there, a man named Kawar Niyam Hashmi, read it and came to a different conclusion. He assigned reporters to look into it. He was not certain it was real, but he was certain it required investigation. When the reporters arrived at 16B Ravi Road, the house was unlocked. The door opened. They stepped inside. The smell hit them first. The walls had dark staining. The floor was discolored in a way that was not from ordinary dirt. In the main living space, sitting in the open, were two large metal vats. The vats were filled with acid. Inside the acid were what remained of human bodies. The remains had been partially dissolved. They had not been completely disposed of. Iqbal had left them deliberately as a statement, as evidence he was providing of his own crimes. Around the room, in plastic bags, were children's clothing and shoes. 9 bags labeled and sorted, photographs of boys, a chain, heavy and dark, that had been used as a killing instrument, a diary with the names and ages of 100 victims written in the same hand that had written the letter. A separate note left in the house said, "The bodies in this house have not been disposed of intentionally. They are here for you to find." The reporters called the police. The police who came this time were not able to dismiss what they found. The Lahore Police Headquarters, which had ignored the letter 3 weeks earlier, was now looking at a scene that made the evening news across the country by the end of that day. The manhunt that followed was described by Pakistani authorities as the largest in the nation's history. Police dragged the Ravi River with nets, looking for the body of a man who had written in his letter that he planned to drown himself there once his mission was complete. They found nothing. 4 of Iqbal's accomplices, teenage boys who had been living in his house and had helped him lure victims, were arrested in a town called Sohawa. One of those boys was named Ishaq, known by the nickname Billa. Within days of being taken into custody, Billa was dead. The official explanation was that he had jumped from a 3rd-floor window at the Criminal Investigation Agency headquarters. A post-mortem examination suggested that significant force had been used against his body before his death. The entire Lahore police administration was changed as a result of the incident. The search for Javed Iqbal continued for a month, and then on the night of December 30, 1999, the man they were searching for walked through the front door of the Daily Jang offices and identified himself. He was transferred to police custody that night. He was charged. He was put in Kot Lakhpat jail in Lahore. And then the parents began coming. From across Pakistan, from cities and towns and rural districts, families who had filed missing person reports that went nowhere started coming to Lahore. Police laid out the children's clothing and shoes recovered from the house at the Ravi Road police station. Parents walked through the room looking at small shoes, at children's shirts, at trousers their children had been wearing the last time they were seen. Several parents identified items not just by sight, but by the specific stitching. In poor neighborhoods across Pakistan, mothers sewed their children's clothes by hand. They knew the stitches they had made. They identified those stitches on clothing recovered from the house of a man who was now in a prison cell. The trial began in February 2000 in the court of a Lahore judge named Ala Baksh Ranjha. The courtroom was packed every day. Public anger was so extreme that Iqbal had to be escorted through crowds by more than a dozen officers on each visit, because parents in the crowd had attempted to reach him. The prosecution presented Iqbal's own confession, his diary, the partially dissolved remains of at least 2 children still identifiable in the acid vats, testimony from over 100 witnesses, and the physical evidence from the house. Investigators had found the rickshaw driver who had transported acid drums from the house to the river on Iqbal's behalf. They had found a street cart vendor who had seen 2 of Iqbal's missing victims in the company of his employees before they disappeared. Iqbal, by this point, had changed his story. He told the court the entire thing was a staged performance. He said he had fabricated the evidence and planted everything in the house to draw attention to the terrible neglect of street children in Pakistan. He said the shoes and clothes were bought from a second-hand market. He said his confessional statements had been made under extreme stress. He said he was innocent. His lawyers made the same argument. They said the confession was a protest, not a crime. The judge did not accept this. On March 16, 2000, Javed Iqbal was found guilty of 100 counts of murder. His accomplice Sajid Ahmed, 17 years old, was convicted alongside him. 2 younger boys, Mohammad Nadeem and Mohammad Sabir, received lengthy prison sentences. The sentence handed down for Iqbal was one the Pakistani legal system had never imposed before. Judge Ranjha stood and read it aloud. Iqbal would be strangled to death in public, in front of the families of the children he had killed. He would be strangled with the same chain that had been found in the house on Ravi Road. After death, His body would be cut into 100 pieces, one for each victim. Those pieces would be dissolved in acid. The sentence was designed in every precise detail to mirror what he had done. Pakistan's Interior Minister, Moinuddin Haider, announced immediately that the sentence could not be carried out. Pakistan had signed international human rights agreements that prohibited such treatment, regardless of the crime. The sentence was blocked. Iqbal was to remain in Kot Lakhpat jail while the legal challenges were processed. He remained there for a year and a half. On the night of October 8, 2001, a prison guard named Iftikhar Hussain was on duty outside the cells in Block 7 of Kot Lakhpat jail. Iqbal and Sajid were held in adjacent cells. At 5 o'clock in the morning on October 9, jail staff found both of them hanging in their cells. Iqbal was 40 years old. Sajid was 20. The jail superintendent told reporters they had hanged themselves using their shirts as ropes. The doctors who examined the bodies at the city mortuary told reporters something different. There were strangulation marks on both necks, but the marks were surrounded by blood splatter. The hands, feet, and nails of both men had turned blue in a way that did not match a typical hanging. Both men had injuries on their bodies that showed signs of blunt force trauma. Iqbal's body showed numerous healed wounds from a blunt weapon, wounds that had been inflicted across a long period of time. His tongue had a cut. He and Sajid were bleeding from their mouths and nostrils when discovered. Iqbal's family refused to collect his body. His brothers told reporters that Javed had died for them the day he confessed. They said they would have nothing to do with him. Nobody claimed the body. The official verdict was suicide. The investigation into the deaths was handled by the same prison administration that had been on duty that night. No independent inquiry was ordered. No charges were filed in connection with either death. Before he died, Iqbal had told his lawyer that he wanted to reveal the names of senior government officials who had attended parties at his house and had abused children there. His lawyer and his family believe he was killed before he could make those names public. The officials he intended to name were never identified. The statement was never made. Prosecutors, for their part, pointed to a different kind of evidence. The fact that of the 100 boys Javed Iqbal claimed to have killed, not one was ever found alive. Not a single child walked back to his parents. Parents identified their children's belongings one after another, item by item, stitch by stitch. The human remains in those acid vats were real. The diary was real. The chain was real. Whether the full truth of who Iqbal was, who helped him, and who in authority may have protected him across years of visible criminal behavior will ever be known, is a different question. Over 200 missing child reports had sat untouched in Lahore police files before Iqbal sent his letters. A boy had escaped from his house and made a complaint that went nowhere. Charges had been filed against him twice before, in 1985 and 1990, and neither had resulted in a single day of imprisonment. A man had killed 100 children in a city of millions over the course of roughly a year, and not one institution had connected the dots until he connected them himself. He was the one who called. He was the one who sent the letters. He was the one who walked through the newspaper door. He chose when the world found out, and he died before anyone could ask him why.